begin this session of the program, have our esteemed speakers summarize and share the key takeaways and learnings from the deliberations so far. We have amongst us for the session Mr. SY Siddique, Chairman, AIMA Core Committee on HR and Executive Advisor, Maruti Suzuki India Ltd, Mr. P Dwarkanath, former Chairman, GSK Consumer Healthcare Limited, and the session would be moderated by Ms. Manu Wadhwa, CHRO, Sony Pictures Network. With this, I hand over the session to the session moderator, Ms. Wadhwa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Soumya. You have been wonderful so far. So as we were talking, Mr. Siddique and Dwarka said that this kind of literally culminates into the veterans of the industry, the stalwarts of the industry giving your finer tuned points on what the playbook to reimagine the new order looked like. And as you were stating that let's make this conversation of the next 45 minutes as to what additional insights you feel the audience, the listeners can take back from us. But before we get started, quick recap for all of you of what happened in the last 2 days. We had some very deep, rich insights on various elements that are an integral component of the way we look at integral redefining its new normal. And all those ideas, as we were conceptualizing the design of this playbook, were centered around making sure that when you listen to those ideas, they're implementable. They're implementable agnostic of industry. They are practical. They are coming in with challenge, but they're also coming in with a problem to solve and a solution thereon. So I hope you have heard those insights from some very credible industry leaders. Leaders wore the hat of teachers, and that same effort is going to continue today as well, as we will hear Mr. Siddique and Mr. Dwarka talk about their nuggets of what they are thinking about the new normal. So my first question in the entire frame of hearing the last 2 days goes to both of you, sir, that as you've heard various sessions which ranged from a variety of topics on HR, right from the way we should reimagine workforce planning, all the way to the session which just happened on how do you refresh or click a button of reinstating culture in the new normal. What are the top 2 trends that you say are here to stay? And they are the ones which, if anybody is listening in, should definitely go back to their drawing book and start thinking about and implementing here and now.
Saklin bhai?
Durga, I think you may please go first.
Okay. At the outset, good afternoon to everyone. I must, at the outset, my compliments to Saklin bhai, who had this conclave brilliantly with the support of Manu, who is really the backbone in terms of curating this, and also Neeraj and other AIMA staff. Since I have been involved with AIMA, I take this role to compliment and thank you for having me here. I think it's a fabulous 1.5 day session. I heard most of the sessions. My key takeaways is just to relate to my own experience, Manu, if I can. You see, in my 50 years of corporate experience, the last 1 year has been really what I call mind-boggling. And I don't think I had those sort of experience in the 49 years of my service, barring the last 9 months. I never thought I retired from corporate life through online handing over the note or having a farewell, which I never expected to happen when I left the office for the last time on 17th March 2020. So to put it, 2 trends, which I think from my perspective is change is constant and dynamic. I think time has come for HR, and I think it's a great awakening call. HR must focus on people's first mindset that provides in terms of empathy, resilience, and empowerment, which I never experienced that. And so the 2 words are people and technology through adaptation, through agility, to resilience, whatever may call. So the never I have experienced in my life, I read many times Maslow theory of hierarchy of needs. For me, the needs go in that order: pyramid fashion, starting from physical needs, safety needs, and then going to the belongingness, as well as then ultimately ending with self-actualization. But the pyramid is reversed totally. I think the first focus on HR priorities and trends is safety and well-being of the people, and secondly, how quickly you can adopt to the technology to deliver the results. So the balance between the lives and livelihood is which has become the challenge for HR, which was never been there. The focus was more towards employees. Today it is not only to employees but the entire stakeholders management. There is an outside in perspective, and it is no longer confined to profits. I think, as Saklin Bhai said it in the beginning, I totally, align with that. It is with purpose. I think, you need to have profits, but employees have started looking for the purpose. What is the value proposition here for the organization, rather than just how but profits have become important. It is no longer hierarchical. It is network based. It is no longer controlling and command. I want to see physically present. It's gone to flexi working, whatever the other modes, which I don't want to allude here. It's more an empowerment. It is no longer a private or a privacy, but it's more transparency. I think it's a planning towards the experimentation. So it is through digitalization, which we have all quickly adopted. I think, to sum it up, we have learned two things. How do you balance between the lives and livelihood? And, ultimately, people makes a difference. As the quote says, Richard Dupree of P&G and others, it is ultimately people who makes a difference. But as a HR, we should make them think in those fashions, be authentic at the same time, and to deliver them the results through people processes. This is in a nutshell. I think, this is my view on the HR trends.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for you to say that half a decade, half a century of experience and last 1 year was completely out of whack for you as well, gives solace to some of us across the board. Mr. Siddique, what's your take on the trends that you heard, and over and above the new normal, what's here to stay?
Yeah. Thank you, Manu. Good afternoon to all of you. I think it was pretty big learning, very exciting yesterday. And I am looking at the first trend, Manu, which was discussed both by Mohan as well as Suresh and his panel on workforce planning. They are talking of something as a reality that in future 25% of new jobs may emerge. They may demand new skills completely. And 25% of the existing jobs and skills may disappear completely. And they are looking at a similar kind of, trends which are likely to surprise us in future. And somewhere perhaps they discuss this need for capability building, which will be again and again on a continuous basis, reskilling, upskilling, de-learning, then relearning. I think that brings to the fore a kind of big, potential area for HR to contribute to the business value by looking at this one big potential of creating the right kind of talent inventory. There was also this one perspective which I added with Mohan yesterday, and that is precisely the thinking which we have at the Maruti's top leadership layer, which is more of ethical kind of leadership perspective. No negative people decisions, that 25% jobs which are going to be outdated and people who have been working with us for 30 years, suddenly we ask them to go. Certainly no. I think we'll have to look at redeployment, flexibility. We'll have to look at ways and means of compassionate leadership coming and supporting this kind of a shift, this kind of a transition. That is one trend, and therefore perhaps when we are looking at capability building, when we are looking at e-modules, when we are looking at e-games, I think it will be very different than what perhaps we have been habitual of in the last 30, 40 years. Second trend, which was again your kind of session, which was on talent management, and Prince and Projecta and all these people were talking of some outstanding perspectives. I think preparing talent for delivering business value, as you were also very excited to hear that concept from Prince, I think is going to be a dimension which will be a big demand. Perhaps when we are looking at age-old hypo kind of theories and that kind of working in talent management may get outdated really. And to a great extent, I think the interest of business leaders, CEO, and the board will
Nani?
be to look at this purpose of the corporate, the organization, the business strategy, and then see this alignment of talent management practices so that we are very, very close to that kind of a purpose for the whole company. In our case, 35, 40,000 people. In every company's case, I think this kind of alignment will be very critical. And perhaps when we are looking at that kind of perspective for different business verticals, that is where the opportunity for HR to create real business value in terms of creating the right kind of talent pool and inventory for, say, for example, next 5 years. In case some company is looking at this 5-year plan for 2025, I think the clear business value which HR can add is to create that strategic talent inventory for that kind of business plan. I think these are the two top trends which I think appealed a lot to me yesterday when I went through these sessions. And
No,
today also perhaps culture and all these perspectives are very, very critical. But since you said two, so I am restricting myself only to two.
please add the third as well as the session goes by, because I know the number is going to be obtained. But on your part, which is stated on strategic talent, chain being created, something which was highlighted by Piyush as well was almost like you have to almost think of us as a factory setup in which supply chain of talent is getting managed. And you have to think of it being closely linked to what the consumer is looking at and what you're actually being able to create through build or buy
So
decisions.
I think, Manu, a lot of work will be required on people analytics now,
Yes,
because then you can do that kind of forecasting model, and then you can really look at adding this business value, to the entire business framework.
absolutely. I'm going to continue a question for you, Mr. Siddiqui, which is that when you brought out that one practice from workforce planning, talent management, specifically around talent to business value, or when we talked about workforce planning from a supply chain perspective, there are very eminent challenges that will be there to implement them. What is your perspective on many listeners out there on how can they prepare their organizations for making that leapfrog shift as they think about these specific talent trends?
I think, Manu, one thing will be that in all of us, I think as human beings, and especially HR people, legal people, IT people, finance people, selectively deleting the past is a very big challenge for us. You would like to hold on to our past, as Rajiv was saying, part of this culture session. That is, I think, is the key for us to first understand. Yesterday, Mohan made one very powerful statement. He says that you'll have to reimagine your business framework, business strategy, and then try to see, align to that, what kind of transition, transformation we'll have to undertake. In my thinking, perhaps when we are looking at this talent management perspective, we'll have to cut off from the past HR practices on which we have been holding on for many years. And when we look at this out of box perspective, when we look at this hyper personalization of career plans, for example, I think somewhere you'll have to start thinking out of box. One size may not fit all, so therefore perhaps we'll have to look at this flexibility. When we are looking at processes, especially in HR, and when we are talking of flexibility, I'm also bringing in the different kind of workforce with which we will be required to handle. One type of regimented workforce is outdated, gone. Perhaps within, as Mohan yesterday commented, that within certain company like Maruti, 4 generations of people are working together. They are all very different in their aspirations. So one size fit all in any case is not going to work. But when we look at gig, when we look at temp manpower, when we look at temp CEOs coming in, I think, do we have the flexibility, first of all, here to really accept some such ideas? And I think aligning with the purpose of the organization, this flexibility will give lot of potential to align well. The rigidity will keep you away from this aligning process, what we have been talking of. And perhaps when we are looking at people analytics, I'm also looking at HR measurement to kick in a big way. So whatever talent management practice we are talking of, for example, if it is not measurable in terms of business value add, I think it will be redundant in my thinking going forward. And somewhere perhaps looking at this perspective which Prince shared of creating business excellence. Somewhere that is where should be our purpose in terms of all talent management practices which we are going to look at. So some of the conventional PMS, potential management processes, compensation and reward, we'll have to rethink. We'll have to revisit. One last perspective with respect to the compensation and benefits, which I would like to talk to the delegates, which we are trying to practice in Maruti, is this gap between the lowest paid to the highest paid being 400, 500 times is again a very, very big negative practice in which we are banking for many years. I think we'll have to start reducing, compressing this. And to a great extent, this 400, 500 times ratio will have to be brought into 28 times or 32 times, which is the Japanese model between the lowest paid and the highest paid. And there you can imagine the kind of strength of teamwork, team synergy, maybe the kind of people who are engaged and aligned with the purpose of the organization. That becomes very, very convenient and very, very easy. We are talking of fairness, we are talking of transparency, and we are talking of equity opportunity. And somewhere perhaps we may have to look at some of these out-of-box ideas going forward.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Siddique. Mr. Dwarka, I'm going to just add a layer of what you think could be the potential roadmap for our listeners. When you think about whatever Mr. Siddique said, that this is your roadmap, you have to overcome the challenges of rigidity of the past, adopting the new with an out-of-box approach. Gone are the days when, one-time performance appraisal is what the norm was, and many others. For example, measurable analytics or the 400 to 500% gap between the lowest and the highest. What are the challenges which you see in a boardroom when such an idea gets, presented? Will come in, and how can an HR professional get through that challenge? How should they get the management buy-in for it?
It's a great question. I wish I have an answer. You see, a couple of things just to build on to answer this question. I would like to quote Peter Drucker. I mean, I think this reinforces what Sakleen has said just now. The greatest danger in terms of turbulence is not turbulence itself, but it is to act with yesterday's logic. I think, fundamentally, first break all rules. I think in the first break all rules, I'm saying in a more positive sense and not in a negative. I'm not saying don't breach, but first break all rules. I think fundamentally, as you rightly pointed out, Manu, all this have to start from the top. If you want to bring that sort of a transformation changes, which is going to be an ongoing, it's not one time change which you do it and then keep quiet for 5 years, and then this is going to be a dynamic and evolving process. I think what holds good this year may not hold good tomorrow, next year. I'm telling you, even still we need to do many changes. So to address the first point, it's a change in the mindset. Firstly, whether HR guys are convinced, it's important. I think now today it's imperative that people practices is not just the HR practice, but it is business imperative. So it is not only the HR can play the facilitator, but the CEO and the other top managements needs to get that buy-in. This is the need of the hour. This is a business priority. And one of the key elements here to bring the change, it is not only the adoption to the technology, but also change in the mindset of the leaders. I think this is the biggest challenge. I think if you try to influence that, why we should do it, and these results would certainly help what we have all done in 1 year, could reinforce and gives that confidence to people, then they do it. The second aspect, which is very important, you see, when you talk about the talent, the whole definition of talent, according to me, has changed today. I think, if you're saying what is the talent, I think, it is no longer a job or the job value, but it is more to do with the skills. And if you want to survive and revive and thrive in the business, talent management is a key strategic business strategy, which should be aligned with the purpose of the business. So it is therefore incumbent upon the top management and the board to take note. This is no longer just a lip sympathy, but it's nice to have it in the website. And the second bit, I just want to little bit dive into it, how is connected with the rewards management. I think more than the physical reward, what you do financially, it is the psychic income which is very important today, Manu. When I say psychic income, how you feel make the person comfortable, especially during the turbulence and crisis. Some of the companies have treated people with care, due care. I think that makes a difference tomorrow, whether he is a compassionate leader, whether he has empathetic organization, whether there is an inclusive culture, there is no differentiation. This is where the point Sakleen was saying, the difference is too high. These are the aspects which may not be able to change in one day, but yes, now this has woken up many of us. These laws are always there. If you see that you need to disclose in the company financial statements, but nobody has bothered it. But now people have said this is an inclusive culture you want to keep, and you need to bring talent is linked with the business strategy and is linked with the reward. It is not just what you pay. And secondly, tomorrow, it is not what you paid for your tenure or for your delivery. What is your skill sets? I think, as skilling, reskilling, and relearning and learning agility will become the part of the talent management. It's no longer the old school of thought. I have a high post. What you hypo today may not hold good tomorrow. I think you need to relearn and move on. The third bit, which I just want to say here, when you're linking with the reward with the management, I think Sakleen raised a very good point, especially HR tends to forget. There is a famous saying of GSK, if you don't keep scoring, you are just practicing. I think, it's important. It is not that nice to do it. It's not a storytelling. I think, this is where if you don't keep scoring, you're just practicing. And secondly, walk the talk. I think, it is very nice to have an inclusive culture. It's nice to have a culture which is aligned with your values and business. But if you don't do the hardwiring, the soft stuff, I don't want to get into culture. I think you may come up later, but hardwiring the soft stuff, which Rajiv Dubey was alluding brilliantly, I think it's very important. It is not only having a nice statements on the websites and your web pages, but also how do you translate these values into action to make things executable. This is where people fail when there is a transformation change. And last but not the least, if you want to recognize the talent, please remember, organization is the hero. It is not just the leaders. People and leaders make the organization, and ultimately organization is the leader. To sum it up, first, break all rules, a change in the mindset. As I said, outside in perspective is important for HR in deciding the rewards and the talent. It is no longer inside out. And when you are deciding the talent, it is not confined to your employees alone, but also in terms of your stakeholders management, how you ensure that they are rewarded through capability building of your employees to get the best results for all the key stakeholders.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Dwarka. The next question that I have, I'm shifting the gears slightly on to what we're seeing as the operating model changes that are coming across all around us. Whether it is government formalizing different work patterns to organizations finding value in gig workforce patterns. What do you see these operating model shifts will have, an impact on our talent and reward strategies? And again, the same question is, what is that one or two tips you would want to give as organizations think about these operating model changes for their business advantage? And again, as you stated, HR needs to start thinking as a business strategist, and there's no better time than now to be able to deliver on it.
When we look at that, Times of India and Economic Times, a small article on this temp CEOs coming in for a specific assignment and period, what does that mean? I think it means flexibility for us to look at the purpose rather than the process. So perhaps when we look at this kind of a situation over the next 4 or 5 years, as Dwarka said, it is changing continuously. I think we need to look at individual kind of contracts rather than generic contracts in which every MBA, every engineer should fit in. We'll have to get off that part. And one small learning which I can talk to you here is that at one point of time, 2008-9, during that global recession, I went to Detroit to pick up some, top R&D specialists for auto industry, and there was a lot of unemployment there in US. There, when we were looking at somebody who can create a new model for us, styling and design and everything, then I was looking at that one guy's contract in isolation, not bothering about what we offer in Maruti to our GTs and our MBAs and all that kind of crap. And then only I could hire some such 2, 3 people from there and work for us. Somewhere, I think when we are looking at gig, when we are looking at temp, when we are looking at many such possibilities which are going to come in, we'll have to look at new employment contracts. We'll have to look at new kind of cultural processes by which we can coexist and work for the purpose as the main dominating part. And somewhere perhaps that selectively deleting the past again and again comes to my mind can be the mantra which will help us as HR leaders to really align well with the kind of business strategy, CEOs and business leaders with great detailing and homework to look at value add from HR. But this kind of change, perhaps we'll have to look at that it can coexist in a given kind of environment in a company. And that kind of sensitivity to a great extent can only come in from HR in terms of looking at some kind of new normal, which can perhaps answer some of these questions very conveniently. But
Ma-
looking at perhaps our past experience, and I'm sure Dwarka would like to add his thoughts,
yeah.
I think we'll have to overcome this old habit of staying with our old processes and being very loyal to some policies which are going to exist for lifetime. I think that time is gone.
Yeah, if I can just add, Manu, I think, reinforcing what Seclin, one of the best examples, a change HR, some of this said is the operating model change in terms of kind of employees you get, as you said, flexible, the gig workforce and so on. The workplace has changed. I mean, you see, and the third one, the future at work will change depend on the skill sets and which keeps changing based on the ecosystem and which you operate, which is outside in view perspective with thinking. I think, one of the great examples I would like to coming from the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry, how difficult it is for the HR and leaders to change the mindset of the researchers in vaccine discovery that, vaccines can be produced in 1 year's time, which couldn't have been done as a mindset issue that you can never get a vaccine. When we talked to them 6-9 months back, forget about it. It will take 3 to 5 years to get a vaccine to be released. Now, today we got it for 9 months. You see, these are some of the things we forget how important it is for the leaders as well as the HR to influence those guys to ensure that bring the change in mindset. I know some of the things you said. And secondly, we felt that, office means this is the present, factory means this is the present. This is now it's been extended to your house, to your bedroom. I think the whole dimensions have changed. Some of the progressive companies which we used to laugh, I want to give, this is a very minor thing. It touches the courts of the people sometimes. When you're bringing a change, what you do, small things for you, maybe a big thing for those employees, which makes a difference. So the conventional wisdom is gone, which is that now can you imagine some of the organizations have given paternity leave of 8 weeks. What I call share the care. I think the whole concept which was never in the purview of HR or the management earlier, it's become extended it. So this notional theory of extension of workplace, place of work, future at work will always undergone a change. So it is, think positively with flexibility and adaptability. And, there is no one hard and fast rule. Ultimately, what it matters is it is not only what you deliver, but also how you deliver. I think the focus has shifted just from what is the outcome, but how you achieve the outcome. I think Saklin has touched it earlier. The ethics and the authenticity of the leadership also been measured, and wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And the last comment which you made centered around first the example of vaccine. I think it's a brilliant one because it breaks the patterns of a cycle time of 3 years to 4 years on something
Yeah.
which we thought will take.
Even Sakleen was asking me, I'm saying, forget about 3 years, because that is what my top scientists in pharmaceutical companies have said. I think, this is a great example for us how we need to, there may be many changes, resistance by the people, be it in automobile industry, be it in FMCG. This is the way we do it. This is the best way to do it. We know it all. That change, it's very easy to say in the platform, but get difficult. This is where we need to read the mindset.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to put you on the spot for this particular question because I'm sure you have displayed it in many a times in your boardroom conversations. A lot of what you're stating builds into having the courage to stand for what you believe is future stated. What's your advice to many listeners out there to say, how do you develop that courage and what goes into the key ingredients or the secret mix?
I don't. I wish I know the secret mix, but I think one shift has taken place today is to answer you. Is earlier people were hesitant to take risks, and now people are willing to take risks, and companies have started acknowledging that your ability to take risks as long it is done with a good intent and with a purpose in mind, as what Sakleen was saying, alluding since yesterday. I think when you do it, now people are in a position to appreciate you, understand you. When somebody said in the panel earlier, it's very difficult to say no or to give a contrary view. Sometimes you may not say no, Manu. You stand in your board and say, this is the way we are doing it, but I want to change it. The eyebrows will be raised. Because in India, it's a psychology, human psychology. It's not only India, it can happen anywhere. But, according to me, before you bowl a ball, you should understand how the pitch is behaving, who is the batsman, and what is the field setting. I don't think, if I go and say that, go and challenge your board members and try to bring it. It is not as simple as I say here to do it. Sakleen Bhai is a great off spinner. He will tell you. So it is important that you need the mindset. You need to go with 2 purpose statements. Why you want to bring this change and how is going to help the organization. If you communicate that very succinctly and drive this purpose, then people would understand and they give a chance. So one shift has happened in this is courage to speak out, which was not a great forte with my generation, but the younger generation, because of the ecosystem in which you operated, I think people have started understanding and maybe tomorrow appreciating it, but raise the question at the right time. But don't misuse the position given to you. That may not be seen well. That is one advice to the youngsters. Because you are given opportunity to ask a question, don't make it a class participation. But when you raise the question, you should raise with clarity and with purpose and how is going to help. You may succeed or you may fail. But win or lose is not this. You should not get into that syndrome. When you raise a question, raise it with objectivity. Then you would succeed. Example, this question of change in the vaccine itself is a great example, which has been discussed in the boardroom before they've been circulated for the public. So this is how I see this aspect. It depends on the culture of the organization. Some of the cultures may accept question and challenge. Some of the questions may be difficult to accept. So you need to read the mindset. There is no one universal answer. Again, it depends the evolution of the culture of in a particular organization and its leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Siddique, what's your take on this?
I think, Manu, quite similar. What I personally think in my own experience and having that courage and guts to, talk to the board differently, suggest something differently, converting a, public sector company into a private sector company was not easy. So perhaps I think if you have the passion on your kind of chair on the sleeve that you are doing it for the company, for the people, first principle. Second is you must have your homework done well. If you have done your homework well, that is the second essential prerequisite. Third, your past credibility and character will help, as Dwarka was just mentioning. I think based on these three principles, I have gone into very tough calls, very tough decisions at the board level at Suzuki Japan, and they have been quite okay, fine. And we have done things which people couldn't imagine that this can happen in a company like Maruti. But to a great extent, I think that basic risk taking is part of a professional's career in HR or business or CEO or CXO, whatever. If you are not a risk taker, then you are finished, in my thinking. And that courage, that gut, perhaps what you referred to, will come into many ways. When you are addressing your employee population, you need that courage, that guts. When you are addressing your union top body, you need that, courage, that kind of guts. But what you will be getting a big help is your past credibility and character, your detailing, and your intent, your passion to do something for the company and for the people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And with a few minutes left, this is going to be my culminating question to both of you, which centers around. We talked about an individual character, converting it into culture. We just had a session on culture. What is that one tip which both of you would give their culture, their organization's culture for the new normal?
Gorga, would you like to start, please?
You mean what one tip on culture?
One tip to change or refresh the culture for the new normal.
Can I go?
Please. Yeah.
Secretary? Yes, for me, I know culture is, I think Rajiv Bhai has put it very well, a smell of the place, it's a culture is the smell of the face. I liked it. Of course, Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast, but the fact remains, in order to, for me, it's culture is the way of life, and is the way we work and the way we live. And culture is like a preamble of the Constitution, liberties, justice, and dignity. That cannot change, but the other manifestations can change from time to time. So one of the things is, if you want to really succeed as a good organization, great examples like Maruti, what he has brought public sector to a private sector and joint sector, is culture needs to start from the top. If it starts from the top, it can cascade down brilliantly, but it needs to reach all levels. And to conclude, from me, if I have to say in one sentence, if you want to say what is the culture, it is hardwiring the soft stuff effectively. That means you may have a great values, but explain those values by manifestation and see that is executed through great strategies, processes, and procedures, and communicate to all concerned. To conclude, organization is ultimately his hero. Any culture which is inclusive embraces this principle of organization is hero, then those organizations will succeed.
Thank you. Mr. Siddique?
I think, part of the new world order when we are talking of, we would need to reimagine our business framework and the core purpose going forward. And then maybe look at organization design, team structures, business processes, and also finally the new culture which we would like to bring in. So curating this culture, making this change will be part, in my thinking, of a strategic transformation, which companies will have to undertake to stay relevant. Now, how part? First problem which we need to be very conscious of, creating a stated culture versus actual culture. That conflict better to avoid, And in our case, Japanese companies on the shop floor, everybody must wear a cap or a helmet. Either you wear it or then don't make that policy, because somebody having a policy not wearing the cap or helmet is very, very bad in my thinking. Stated culture versus actual culture. We should reduce the shock, reduce the difference to the extent possible is the important how part. In my thinking, shared goal, unifier, lots of communication, internal communication focus, transparency, listening leadership, empathy, to a great extent, patience for failure, where we are talking of risk taking, experimentation. I think I would like to prefer our delegates to look at creating that kind of a culture, which in this turbulence will be extremely helpful. Perhaps we are looking at, as Rajiv said, mutual trust, meaning to our people, respect for individuals. That is where they will be able to align with the core purpose of the company in a big way. Performance excellence can be created, in my thinking, in that perspective. And to a great extent, perhaps when we are looking at this entire process, it may not be an overnight process. As Dwarka said earlier, it may take 2 years, may take 3 years, but perhaps we can look at this kind of strategic transformation as far as culture is concerned.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Siddique and Mr. Dwarka. In the interest of time, I'll just pick up a couple of questions that have come from audience for both of you. One talks about that COVID has taught everyone, according to you, different point of view for the organization's operations. What has been that one thing for you, which you have learned as the office holder for your organization?
I think, Manu, in our case, the first thing which we learned is uh, people health and well-being is going to drive the rest of our life in Maruti. We have to work in factories, we have to have a hybrid model in offices and engineering and finance and other things. But I think the first thing we realized is, if we are solidly with our people in terms of their health and well-being, including their families, I think that will be the biggest driving force. So people first is my biggest learning, because it has been a people crisis. It has not been a business crisis misunderstood by people all over the place. It has been an unprecedented people crisis. And therefore, I think most companies, top leadership agenda is giving top priority to people first, well-being, health, and safety.
Thank you. Dwarka sir, this question I'll put for you, that we've learned a lot in the session today, and the participant mentioned various elements of their learnings of the last 2 days. They stated that they want to hear more on moral ethics from an HR's perspective. Any thoughts that you have there?
I think it's a wonderful question. We just very briefly touched upon. Ultimately, one thing has come out very clearly, which also reflects the value systems and the culture of the organization. During this pandemic, it's a great example. Let us take concrete examples so that they can understand and conceptualize better. Some of the companies have said we care for people. I always said it before, I think, but they've demonstrated it very well during this pandemic, and especially during lockdown and so on. It is not the loss. As long as you're able to sustain the business in a long-term perspective, do not get carried away by 1 year profit P&L, but more by balance sheet, which brings the culture of the organization. The litmus test of a good inclusive culture, what Saklin Bhai and me been alluded and been talked earlier, the litmus test is how you treated people in terms of the crisis. I think, that is very important. This was a great, eye-opener for many HR leaders and business leaders. We used to say people are the valuable assets, but how did they treat during that crisis? That is the litmus test for me. I think to answer it, yes, ultimately is the leadership and the culture. You may have a great values, but how do you translate those values and make it walk the talk? This is where I feel this is a great eye-opener, and HR should play a vital role in future to ensure that what business leaders talk in a forums, ultimately it's implemented.
Thank you. And it reminds me of my favorite learning of life, that it does not matter what people say or do to you. It matters how they make you feel.
Make you feel it. Well said.
Correct. Truly have had an opportunity to demonstrate it. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Mr. Siddique and Mr. Dwarka, for giving your nuggets, takeaways, and adding insights for the audience. I don't think I'll be able to do justice to the elaborate learning of the last 45 minutes, but I will try my best to pick up the threads which I got from both of you. One of the biggest ones that I continue to hear from all the sessions of both of you is that it's a very important part in today's world for organizations to go back to their drawing board and rethink their purpose, what they stand for. and connect every aspect of their people's strategy thereon. Additionally, as we had set the ethos of this forum to be more focused on demonstrable how, it's very important for all of you to think about designing effective people practices, but balancing it with inclusion and effective execution. Making sure that the organizations of the future, and as you are thinking, you're focusing on change management. You're not just focusing on change management across the board, but it starts from the top. And I think Mr. Dwarka stated it very rightfully when you stated that changing mindsets is very, very critical. Process change will happen automatically. Another element which I picked up and learned from is that the significance of workforce planning is nowhere better than today. And some of us connected it to supply chain management, but balancing it with the reskilling agenda is very important. Talent getting connected to value creation for business growth and sustainability, I hope is a takeaway that all of you are remembering. On rewards, I think the entire perspective getting shifted to wellness, safety, mind, and you stated something, psychic income. I'm going to take that back, Mr. Dwarka. It's such a beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm sure many of us will remember it as we are redefining our reward strategies. And something which you stated, Mr. Siddique, which is centered around workplace analytics, not just becoming data, but becoming a science for all of us. And you stated this yesterday in your address as well, that not just think about data and analytics, but it has to be almost like finance looks at their balance sheet. HR should have their science on driving workplace agenda, and there's no time better than today. Another element, which is a pickup from the technology session, and I still remember the 6 Ds, which our facilitator talked about. I hope you will remember them, all of you. Culture, entrepreneurship, inverting the pyramid, it starts from the top. But all, this culminates into the new normal, asking you, pushing you, nudging you, urging you to think out of the box, to shackle the old beliefs, to have the courage to be able to first accept that one size will not fit all, and you will have to start driving that change in your organizations. The takeaway, which I kind of culminate all of this session in, and once again, thanking all of you for listening in, is automating the routine and humanizing the exceptional should be your mantra as you're redefining your HR practices for the new normal. So thank you so much, Mr. Siddique and Mr. Dwarka.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Manu.
Thank you, Manu. Thank you.
So back to the MC, and we'll take the next session forward.
I must say the session was like whipped cream with cherries on top. We could not have better leaders to present learnings and the way forward. Thank you so much, Mr. Siddique, Mr. Dwarkanath, and Ms. Wadhwa. Thank you so much for this wonderful session on key takeaways.